Hello and welcome to another combat mission after action report. My opponent is Herr Oberst 63. This is a scenario based in France on the 20th of July 1944. The scenario is called Bois de Baugin and I'm in command of the Axis forces that are in the defensive position for this scenario. Personally, I'm not a great fan of some of the scenarios attack and defend. Often finding that the defence doesn't allow a lot of opportunity for manoeuvre or for tactical decisions. I intentionally chose this scenario because it puts me in exactly that position. I'm forced to defend 4 static defensive objectives with very little opportunity to move forces in between the different objectives, so I really am trying to work out what my opponent is going to do in his attack and second guess where my defense should be. As you can see from the terrain preview, there's a lot of open ground in between the defensive locations and the objectives. I have some hard cover in the village in the centre, comprising some brick built buildings and some stone walls. On my right flank, the objective is a woodland, dense woodland with an open area in front of them. The view for the Allied is up this relatively steep hill, whilst the Allies have a relatively open area to attack from with little concealment or cover. It does give them an opportunity for a very wide front. They'll also have a far superior force to mine. I anticipate 2, possibly 3 companies of infantry and 1 company of armour. With a good overview of my 4 objectives, you can also see the disposition of my forces. I have 2 PaK AT guns and 2 Jagdpanzer tank destroyers. I've tried to deploy them with complementary fields of fire and covering arcs, whilst trying to minimise the amount of exposure they have to enemy fire. And to my front I have 3 elements of picket forces, then on my right flank a number of HMGs, and also on my left and to my centre I've split out my forces to cover the avenue of advance and protect the centre objective. My forces consist of 6 company from the 914th Grenadier Guards and also 1 platoon from 7th Company. All squads are at approximately 70% strength. On my right flank I've deployed my forces away from the front line of the forest in an attempt to avoid direct fire from the Americans as they attack. It does restrict their line of sight. They can't actually see out of the forest into the open area where the US will potentially attack, but the sheer weight of firepower that the Americans can bring to bear does mean that there's no way they can win a firefight. I've also tried to put my armour and my PaK guns as far into the woodland as possible to give them as much concealment before we actually start engaging. I've also used some foxholes which I know are easy to spot, but I wanted to provide some hard cover for the guns which are on the front of the tree line. I do have some excellent line of sight. On my left flank, my actual defensive line is pretty short. There's not a lot I can deploy in this area. Again, I've used some foxholes, I've deployed some forces further back, but this is probably one of my weaker fronts to defend because it's so narrow. I've broken all of my squads out on both flanks to try and maximise the amount of dispersed infantry I can deploy. So to recap, here are my 4 objectives: left, right, centre rear and centre front. The yellow markers show my defensive line. The short grey markers show my picket forces to spot and engage the initial elements of the American advance. The purple lines show my AT field of fire, and the blue lines show my anticipated avenues of advance from the American opponent. So with my defence set, let's step into the battle. Within the first couple of minutes I start to get my first contacts. On my left flank I get eyes on what looks like potentially a support group, MMG or HMG. I spot a Sherman and some further infantry moving up the centre road. On my right flank I spot further infantry movements. Looks like at least a squad, maybe more. My snipers engage, and it's not long before my pickets come under heavy fire. On my right flank I'm seeing a lot of infantry movement. It looks to be a platoon strength force at the minimum. And it looks like they're immediately sending out some scouts up the hillside towards my right flank objective. I move a force to engage the scouts as they enter the forest, but ensure my troops do not have line of sight out of the forest, preventing any American engagement. I get armour sound contacts on my right flank. The scouts are quickly dealt with. It seems my right flank is immediately coming under assault with armour support. I can see at least a platoon advancing up the hillside. As I get more sightings, it looks larger than a platoon assault, potentially a company assault, and they're advancing quickly. I lay down some crossfire from my defenders on my left flank, but it's a long distance, about 800 metres away, and it's not that effective. My defence on my right flank is immediately outgunned. Their only advantage is the concealment and some of the cover they have from the box moves. Fighting is heavy and violent. Meanwhile, my opponent has also advanced on my left flank. My AT spots 2 Shermans. And I get my first armour kill. Continue to try to provide crossfire support from my left flank to my right flank. The Americans push hard and there's no subtlety in their attack. I spot more armour on my right flank and in my centre. My second pack gets eyes on. Second armour kill. My left flank support MGs come under heavy fire. But the Sherman fire reveals itself. The first shot sails over the turret. The second is a solid hit. My FO calls in danger close artillery fire on my right flank, whilst the Jagdpanzer tackles the armour. Grenadiers on the right flank look for hard cover, as the friendly artillery barrage force just beaters away in front of them. GIs withdraw from their attack. The tanks try to lay down covering smoke. The Americans have also advanced quickly onward to my left flank. Meanwhile, my AT is hammering everything it can see. I spot a Sherman quickly advancing right into the defensive forces of my left flank. My weak defence now have to face armour. I tried to rally my troops, but they were already rattled. GIs push my left defence hard. Meanwhile, on my right flank, my barrage comes to an end. Jägerpanzer Spots armour. Aids repelling the attack on my right flank. I spot more Americans advancing on my left flank. I'd anticipated this and had pre-called in an artillery strike. The MGs in the village in the centre managed to stem the advance. My artillery falls on the retreating Americans. In the carnage I get another 80 hit. Meanwhile, my left flank AT engages across the battlefield, taking out Shermans on my right flank. The Americans start a second assault on the woodland on my right flank. Just as a second danger close artillery strike comes in. Second assault is repelled. Meanwhile on the left flank, the battle intensifies. Push forward all of my reserves and then attempt to hold the objective. Too little, too late. I make a command decision and order a fighting withdrawal. Sip rep 25 minutes into battle. I hold the right flank, but I've made the decision to withdraw on the left. My defenders are starting to crumble, and I risk them being isolated and overrun. The TRPs have been a deciding factor on the right flank, and whilst I've taken casualties, I think I can still hold that objective. There's been no direct attack on the village in the centre, so I focus my attention on my withdrawal from the objective on my left flank and to build a defence in the centre village and the centre rear objective in order to repel any attack from the copse or woodland on my left flank that I've just withdrawn from. Over the next 25 minutes, I withdraw the forces on my left flank, while still engaging across the battlefield with my AT. I take out more Shermans as he tries to reinforce his right flank, my left. And I bring an artillery barrage down on his attacking position on my right flank. The goal is to secure my right flank objective. The pace of the battle starts to slow considerably. My withdrawing grenadiers achieve the relative safety of the rear centre objective. My opponent appears to have shifted his focus to my left flank. But in the next 20 minutes, I lose a Jagdpanzer, pack to artillery, a second Jagdpanzer to a lucky artillery shot. My platoon in the village harass the Americans as they try to advance up my left flank. As soon as I see any show of force from the Americans on my left flank objective, I greet it with heavy fire. I try to display no signs of weakness. And present a solid defence to her Oberst 63. I guess he has 3, possibly 4 Shermans active. And I need to deter him from bringing them into the battle. It's enough, and Herr Oberst agrees to a ceasefire. I secure a tactical victory, holding 3 of the 4 objectives. I consider my casualties light, and whilst I may have been able to contest the left flank objective, I achieved a victory. And the how? That becomes history. If we look at the map, as I look at my units and the Allies, you can see in the bottom left hand corner the casualties inflicted, who did what. Looking at the AT, you can see my tank destroyer on my left flank. The pack on my left flank. And then if we move over to the right, the pack is still active, and the casualties it inflicted. If we look at the tank destroyer, knocked out, but again armour casualties. On my right flank, the artillery, danger close, a lot of casualties caused to the Americans. My platoon is still dug in. You can see they caused a number of casualties to the assaulting American forces. You can see he reinforced with a half-track, but then also my follow-up artillery barrage on his setup location. Yeah, bit of a mess. It was effective. If we look at the centre, you can see more Shermans knocked out. He has some support forces, more Shermans knocked out as he tried to relocate to my left flank, where my artillery barrage, you see a TRP there, which I used to call in upon his forces as he tried to reinforce the right. And if we take a look at his right flank assault, he still has a couple of active tanks. There's one knocked out. I actually didn't see that knocked out. I'm guessing it was a Panzerfaust that did that. So he's got 2 active Shermans, less than I thought. And his assault force on my right flank, around platoon strength. Not enough to stage an assault. Maybe he could have used the 2 Shermans, but probably insufficient time, and I'm too strong with the crossfire from the village in the centre. Overall, I was pleased with the result. As I mentioned at the start of the match, not a great fan of these types of scenarios, but I put myself in this situation in order to learn and train, and yeah, a good result. I'd like to thank Herr Oberst 63 and see you all again soon.